Welcome, Amy. It's really great to have you here. I'm really glad to have you here talking about habits and mental well-being. So thank you so much for joining us.
Well, thanks so much for having me. I'm really excited about what you're putting together.
Thanks. So why don't we kick off and you share a little bit for people who don't know you about who you are and what you're up to.
Sure. Well, I was trained as a psychologist in a more traditional way in the early 2000s, and kind of realized throughout my training, toward the end of my training, middle to end of my training, that I didn't really want to do that. That didn't really resonate in the way that I thought it did. Um, Really what I always was interested in and wanted to do was just have conversations with people, like meaningful conversations with people about their experience, about how things look to them. Um, I don't know, I just wanted something other than trying to fix problems, I guess, and I knew there were other ways of coming to the way we feel and the way we see life that weren't so clinical, that weren't like, let's, what's wrong for you, let's see if we can dig in and fix it, but just exploring things from another angle. So all of that kind of led me away from my traditional training and eventually into coaching, and then eventually kind of into this conversation that we are in with people. um, Also along that path, just in my personal life, I struggled with anxiety and eating disorders, kind of on and off, and everything I learned in more traditional ways didn't help me. I mean, things were helpful along the way, but I always felt something was kind of lacking there. Even when I initially got into more of a coaching approach, some of that was helpful for me personally, and I saw it be helpful for others. Others of it, not so much. But there was always this sense that, like, there's something missing. There's deeper we can go here. And it's really hard to get there with words. It's really hard to talk about it, but I knew there was more to see. Um, and so I just didn't want to give up. And so I just kept looking for myself and for the people I worked with, and found my way into this kind of conversation. And so today I work with people, mostly online on my online school and programs, helping them primarily with habits and anxiety.
Yeah, and just to put it out there, you're the author of the book, The Little Book of Big Change. And I think it's just an incredible resource. As you know, I share it with a lot of family and friends and clients, and your school by the same name also, I think, is just an incredible resource. But here's why. Like, I, like your story, I relate to in the sense of I've always been curious about change and transformation. I've always been curious about how to bring our best self to whatever we're up to. Now, for me, that's been, mostly in the area of personal and professional leadership, organizational development. But I think at the heart of what you share and teach is exactly at the heart, obviously, of what I do as well. And I would love for you to speak a little bit, Amy, about what you've seen. Like, where is the source of that change? What's really going on? Why do we sometimes, change is easy, and other times, almost when we want it most, it's
Mhm.
much more of a struggle.
Yeah. It's like we're kind of shooting blindfolded, and it feels like that. And sometimes we hit it, and a lot of times we miss it. And it can just be so frustrating. And I think the the word deeper, it's the word, but it sounds even almost too cliche in a way. But like, the deeper we look, the more to the absolute core and essence of what's going on for a human being, the closer we are, and the more people change and the more that we see. And so, like, I'll just kind of say it in a nutshell way, and we can unpack it for people if you want. But the more we see kind of who we are by nature, our nature when we were born, before we started thinking over everything, like how we just operate when we're at peace, how things look when we're really calm and relaxed and just hanging out in life. Like, the more we can see about how that works, about what's going on there, and because we can't forget our experience, the more we see about what gets in the way of that, which is our mind talking all the time, freaking us out about things, trying to plan and control everything. The more we see about that, and we kind of see these two things, we see what's there by nature, then what's in the way of it all the time, or what's over it all the time. Things start to just really, really clear up for people. And it sounds crazy, and I'm always a little hesitant to say this to my clients and stuff, my students, because it can sound like they're like, how is this going to go? Like, what are we going to do to make my habit go away? Or what are we going to do to make that change really stick this time? And there is no, here's what you're going to do. It's more a series of, hey, you already have everything you need. You're just thinking over it. So what we're going to do is we're going to come in and help you see how you're thinking over it, how you're already habit free. You just think you aren't, and you have some mental habits that crop up and look real. And as you see more about that, your consciousness kind of rises. You see life from fresh eyes, with new eyes. And you will see your habit differently, if it's even there to see anymore. Like, it will start to fall away. And I say I'm hesitant about that because, still I hear that sometimes. I'm like, wow, that sounds like too good to be true. And what the heck is she talking about? And how? Because that's what everyone wants to know. But it's not a how. It's a here's how it goes when we see clearly. So it's, this kind of insight, as we say, this series of kind of conversation and just exploration into who we really are, that when we see more about that, so much of what's in the way, no matter what it is, stress, habits, anxiety, extra weight we're carrying, extra issues we've been carrying on, holding on to for life, they're made of thought. So they fall away the more we see how all of this works.
Yeah, a couple things come to me, Amy. The first is I'm wondering if it might be helpful here for you to share either your own story or another example of how, when they saw that, what it actually did. Like, could you share a little bit there?
Yeah. Well, I'll share part of my own story. So with my habit, I, I think we get in this place where life is very sort of generalized. So when I was going through my binge eating habit, um, it looked like that's who I was. And I could look, like, from my mind, I was just kind of living in my head, as we do. And I could look and say, well, clearly I meet the criteria for this diagnosis. I did this yesterday. I think about this all the time. It's a no-brainer. Like, there's no argument here. I fit this category perfectly. And I think we kind of just take that to the extreme. I definitely took that to the extreme. So I also, as everyone does, had lots of times when I wasn't anywhere in that category. But those kind of fall by the wayside. We become blind to those because we're looking at the category. We're looking at the box, saying, how do I get it? I'm in this box. And so we just see what's consistent with that. So now I can see that. But at the time, it was like I just was living in this certain level where you almost have blinders on, just doing what people with that habit do, feeling all the stuff people with that habit feel, trying to fix it, thinking there was something wrong with me because I was in this box and I had to find a way, all about the hows, to get myself out of that box, which just kept me staring at the box so that I could fix the box and make the box go away. And it, was just this endless cycle. And it's weird to talk about kind of what I saw exactly, but one of the things that really was huge initially was someone just saying, what if you're actually habit free, you're actually healthy, but you have this constant hum of thinking that's talking about the habit all the time. That's not how they said it. That's how I remember it right now. But there, like, even as I say that now, there's such a feeling in that of, oh my gosh, that kind of makes sense. What if, what if we're all okay all the time? But we have this little machine in our heads, this little, like, appliance in our heads that just has this consistent hum of the same conversation, the same thoughts, the same memories. And when we think that's us, we can't help but live out that habitual experience. So when someone asked me that or posed that question, it really I didn't see much in it at first, but it really kind of got me thinking like, wow, that kind of makes sense. And I still didn't know who I was. Like, okay, well, where's the healthy one? Bring her out, because I was still in the hum of habitual thinking. But I saw, wow, maybe that's a possibility. And just in that little, it's like a door was just kind of cracked open. Just in that, I began seeing evidence of that. So rather than just evidence of who I thought I was. So I noticed for the first time in years when I at times would not be thinking at all about my habit. Times when I just felt really peaceful. I started to notice, just kind of get the eyes to see when I would just relax and fall asleep at night, all that thinking went away. And when I woke up in the morning, I didn't have a habit until I remembered, oh yeah, here's what you do. Here's what you ate yesterday. Here's what you're going to do today. Then, oh, there's my habit. Like that started popping out of the woodwork, like, oh my gosh, this has always been the case, but I couldn't see it. And from there, I mean, long story short, but it kind of just unraveled, and it wasn't really that long of a story. It happened pretty quickly. And that's kind of how it looks for people. We see a little bit, and then our whole footing, our whole grounding kind of changes. And from there, it's like you climb a ladder a little bit. From a few steps up, now there's a whole new world you didn't know existed. And then you get to kind of keep going up the ladder.
Yeah, I love that story. And I know so many people will relate to it in their own way. And I think what you're just saying there is so critical, that right now we look limited, options look limited, possibility looks limited because of a state of mind, because of thought, no other reason.
Yeah.
And when I listen to you, I'm just struck by, oh yeah, if we understand that, if we really see it, then thought becomes less gripping, and naturally we feel a little bit more internal spaciousness. And a natural byproduct of that is, like you said, we go up the ladder, we see a fresh idea about ourselves, or we see our resiliency, we see the moments, like you said, that we're not gripped by habit or whatever's going on. I think that's amazing. And I think, just to bring home the point, what I hear you saying is that's the source of change, because so many of us believe that the source is behavior modification, right?
Mm-hmm.
And getting a control on our behavior, especially when we're struggling with something we're trying to improve or stop.
Yeah.
And yet, what I would love to hear you speak to a little bit more is that, that it's not the behavior, it's where that source is and how that affects our behavior.
Yes. Because our behavior just flows naturally from what we see, from how life looks in any given moment. There's no other option. Like, even when we really try willpower, really try to act like they do, or act as if, or whatever all that stuff is, where we're trying to do something that doesn't really fit with how we see life, it never works all that well. Sure as heck isn't sustainable. So really all we do, I mean, our behavior just flows from what we see, from how life looks to us. So it just makes so much sense that as we walk up that ladder, our behavior is naturally going to get so much better. And it's a big question, because a lot of people wonder that. We're inundated with, like, change your behavior and do these things. And I agree. And I know you agree. Like, yes, behavior has to change at some point. It's just a question of when. Do we put the focus there and try to change behavior first? It just doesn't make sense. It's like trying to teach a 3-year-old to do division. Like, that's not going to work. Let the kid grow up. They'll grow into division. It'll be a lot easier that way.
Yeah, and I think, again, it's nice to slow it down, what you're saying, because I think when people look at it, just makes sense. And really, what we're saying is that, our thinking creates an internal climate. That climate creates a certain feeling level, a certain experience, and then we behave, then we act.
Yeah.
So in a way, what you're really highlighting is we got to go before the behavior even is there, to have, in that case, we're pulling the right lever.
Yeah. Yeah. And it really goes back to what you said about how um, when things look limited, we're just in limited thinking, So, I mean, if we see that us at any point in our lives, or anyone on earth, because we all work the same way, have ever been had a wider view of what's possible, have ever been lighter and freer and more expansive and seen possibility and all of that, had a wider range of behavior available to us. Like, there's this openness that is our nature. It just is. Like, we were born into that, and then we've kind of mentally boxed ourselves in a sense, and forgotten that. But that openness is our nature. And so if we know that's the case, or we even, if this is new and you're even just playing with this idea, like, what if that's the case? Then what that shows us is, when we aren't fully free and open and running around happy and free like little kids are, we're just thinking our way down into this more narrow existence. That's it. That's it. And if you know that, and you also know that thought also moves, thought's always changing, and we don't have to hang on it. We can let it flow through us. Naturally, we're going to be kind of boxed in, and then we're going to see bigger. We're going to be boxed in. We're going to see bigger all the time. And that does a lot, just to know that. You know what I mean? Like, then we're not like, oh, let me fix this problem, because the problem just means you have a lot on your mind. It's not a thing to run out and fix. It starts to look less to people like, how do I fix this problem or make this habit go away? And more like, oh, wow, I'm really caught up.
Yeah.
And in that, oh my gosh, then they see differently.
Yeah, I was speaking to a client the other day, and now in the midst of kind of the COVID crisis and the pandemic, everyone's at stay at home right now. And she was sharing that she um, realizes how, like, a busy mind, and she gets agitated and restless, and she kind of had coping mechanisms for that. But she's been in this, looking in this direction in this work for a long time. So she has so much more internal space and presence, and she's listening and connected. But she said she's noticing now, being home, how all of a sudden she'll be maybe sitting outside in her garden, but then within, all of a sudden, she realizes she's like in her kitchen organizing the pantry, or she was talking about some of the habits she wants to change. And it was fascinating, because you're right, Amy, that's what she said. She goes, I realize now the source, the resolution isn't anything other than noticing, oh, I just got impulsive compulsive because I'm restless.
Yeah.
It's like, it's the right diagnosis and the right cure in a way.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. And to have this sense that, like you're saying, like, things, it's not a great phrase, it's not perfectly accurate, but like, things kind of right themselves, again. And that's based on that. uh if if it's all okay already, the only problem is ever that we think it's not okay.
Yeah.
And thought always moves, kind of by definition. Things, we're always returning back home, we're returning back to expansiveness, and we're seeing through our compulsiveness, and we're seeing things with fresh eyes. And that's really tough for a mind, just to acknowledge that. For people, like, that's really tough for a mind to get on board with, because minds will hear that as, oh wait, so you're saying just hang out and it's going to fix itself. And but really, I mean, and you don't have to buy into that, or we're not saying that that's literally the way it works. It's more that, just as we see how we're always opening and closing and expanding and contracting naturally, and that there's everything you want is there by default,
Mhm.
it just leaves you in a place to be a little more open, to kind of hang out, and knowing, like you said, that as we're rising, walking that ladder, we're just going to see bigger and newer and clearer things.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm wondering, Amy, in light of kind of where we are in current times, if you could speak to this, what's happening right now, in the sense of people's anxiety about the future, about, maybe stress levels are high, maybe, like, we're going to our coping mechanisms more than ever now, like all the jokes online about, what swimsuit season's going to look like, after stay at home, or, people are kind of, I think it's on their minds a lot more right now. And I'm wondering if you could speak to that.
Yeah. Yeah. And I'm definitely, I mean, people are coping and however it occurs to them to cope. And it is a time, again, just in the spirit in which we're talking about this, it's like when more gets on our mind, the whole reason that we even have habits to begin with is because they kind of help distract us from our mind getting louder and busier. So when minds get louder and busier, habits make sense. And it's a perfect system to kind of see how it is well-meaning in that way. But obviously it's not a great healthy system when we don't see how it's working. But yeah, there's a lot of busyness and a lot of feeling like we need to escape something. And then coupled with the fact that we're at home and all of our normal distraction methods a lot of them are taken away. So a lot of people I'm talking with can't go out and buy their 5 bottles of wine for the week, or can't go out and buy all their favorite foods and all of that stuff. And they can't just go out and distract themselves from their feelings. But I also am seeing, and as we speak today, we're a good 4 or 5 weeks into this, also seeing what's so beautiful is a lot of people seeing, wow, this was mentally really hard, freaked me out in the beginning, was mentally very hard, and I didn't have an escape route that felt good to me. And now a few weeks even after that, seeing, oh my gosh, thank God I didn't have that escape route. I mean, literally this week I've talked to 3 people who do not have their substance of choice and haven't had it for 5 weeks now. And they're like, I can't believe this was right on the other side of those feelings. If I could just sit there and feel it. And I never would have done it on my own. I mean, they may have, but in their words, they think I wasn't going to do this to myself, just cold turkey, but life did this to me. And look, so that's one thing, just to see that everything we do, everything habitual like that is to numb a feeling. And it's okay. We're human, but we're all going to do it in some little ways. But to also just get curious about that. Say, wow, what if we don't need that numbing? What if we sit and feel this? I mean, across the board, all the time, people see that. Wow, I can actually live with a feeling.
Yeah, I can really relate to that. And then, what we're really talking about is getting comfortable being uncomfortable. And what you realize then is that's a temporary experience because it's made of thought, because, no thought is permanent, no state of mind is permanent, no feeling is permanent. So when we get curious, like you're saying, and, are willing to be more uncomfortable, I think we really see what's beneath that. And it just reminds me, I know when I first started getting mentored in this work, one of my mentors said to me, how do you do with boredom? And I kind of laughed and said, I hate boredom. And, and he said to me, you have a really incredible busy mind and a really active mind. And he said, I don't know that you realize that beyond your busy mind, there's a whole new level of connection and depth and impact in your work available to you. And I didn't quite know what he meant because it was a new realization about a busy mind. What is that? But I could feel the truth in it. And Amy, it's just what you said. It required like just being gentle on a journey, no perfection, for me to be curious about that. Like what was beyond, if I got comfortable being bored because it's thought, because it's feeling, it's a idea, that it would fall away, and what would happen. And that's what I started to see. Oh yeah, as I didn't react to every restless urge in me. Like my restlessness, my busyness used to look like get on the phone, do the computer, get outside, go somewhere. I was just sort of at the mercy of this internal restlessness. And to really see, oh, that's not a set personality.
Yeah. Yeah.
There's
No.
so much more options.
Yes. And it's funny because the more you're even just curious about it and getting in like leaning into it a little bit more and not distracting from it, how good that, like, sometimes it doesn't feel good initially, but what you just start to see, oh, this is what I was so afraid of. That's the coolest thing, right? Like this is it, and again, I'm not saying that happens instantly, but way quicker than we think it is, because ultimately all that we're really afraid of is our own mind saying you can't handle that. Our own mind. It's not the feeling, not even the feeling really. It's our mind. It's our mind saying, run, run. You're not good with boredom. You're in this box of people who can't just sit there, and so when all that kind of looks a little less real and dies down, it's incredible what we can feel.
Yeah, and I'm wondering, this kind of comes back to the thought comment and what your mind is doing as that as the reflection, right? And what I mean by that is we label ourselves. And I know with habits, you spoke to this a little bit before, but it's like, oh, I'm an emotional leader. I'm a restless, or like whatever it is. I have a problem with this, and we kind of name these issues, and we don't see them as fluid experience.
Yeah.
And can you speak to that a little bit more?
Yes. Kind of again how our mind just wants to generalize everything, so it does we see it this certain high up level, and it's valuable in some ways. I mean, it helps us get through a very complex world, the world, busy physical world and everything. But but it is amazing how it reminds me of like the ocean as we talk about it. There's like the surface of the ocean with all these waves, and we can pick them out. We can say, that's this kind of wave, and this is this kind of wave. This is a 6 foot wave. This one's 3 feet. This one's this kind. But just beneath that, it's all the same. And even the waves are all water. We can give it a name and a title, and it looks like its own thing, but it's really just water taking a different shape and form. And and when we look at our experience, it's the same way. So only our mind, if you think about what is a habit, I mean, by definition, a habit is something that happens habitually. So it requires a past and a future, a past and a present, and probably thoughts about a future. It requires an identity, a me, and this is what I do, which in all of that has this feeling of solidity to it, like it's a real thing. But and this might be making some heads explode, but that's a great thing to have your head explode a little bit. Like what if that's true on one level? From our mind's level, that's all real and true conceptually. But really, when we look at it, we're just living in life. There's only now. There's no such thing as a past, except for our mind can think about a past and make that up. Who are you? Well, we won't get into that conversation, but we all know we feel different and we can see and experience different things forever. And at the same time, our mind generalizes and says, I'm Amy, I'm Barb, this is about me, which is not always true. So it's like you get the generalization mind level, but when you look a little deeper, there's really just experience in each and every moment. And I love this conversation with habits, especially. Somebody in my school just this week had a massive insight around that. And she was like, wait a minute, just like habits aren't even real. Like there's just moment to moment to moment. And yes, so if I look back in a lot of those moments, I was doing the same thing, but that tells me nothing about a future moment. And that's thought too, but it tells me nothing about this moment. It tells me nothing about this stable who I am and what I have or any of that. So it's awesome to kind of play with those two levels. A mind presents life one way, but then deeper than that, we have a really different experience.
Yeah, and I think it's such a powerful point. And if people look, they'll see evidence of that when things are going on around us, even with, the pandemic and stay at home. We have moments where we feel hopeful and curious about it all, and other moments where it looks really hard, and other moments where it's not on your mind at all.
This is a perfect time to see it. And it's funny because sometimes it can look like, whoa, this is a hard, people have said, this is a harder time to see it. And I think it's actually an easier time to see it because, yes, there is a real thing happening out there. And you're absolutely right. In the middle of this, we've had every experience a person can have. All of us have. It moves all over the place.
Yeah, and Amy, if somebody is hearing this idea in you for the first time, I thinking about them right now, and if you were to talk to them about how they could lean more into this and understand more, what would you advise them? What would you say?
Yeah. we're such a like fish in water with our thinking and our experience, so we just don't even, we're just blind to it a lot. But I think even like that's just a perfect little start. Like just notice, just like you just said, notice how our experience, our moment to moment feelings and thoughts and experience in life changes so much faster than the life out there changes. We're just sitting here and we can go all over the world in our own heads. We can feel anything, in our own experience. Isn't that interesting? That starts to give you a little piece of like, wow, my mind really does lead me all over and I feel wherever it leads me. And if if you're looking really solid, your habits looking really solid, like I'm just a stressed out person and I eat when I'm stressed and that's just how it's always been. Just be, it doesn't take much openness to just be a little bit curious about that. Yes, that has absolutely been your experience, to your mind. That's the generalization of it for sure. And there are lots of moments when you've felt stressed and you haven't eaten. And there's lots of moments when you aren't stressed out. And there's lots of variation in there. And beneath all that experience, what if you're actually still completely healthy, have everything you need beyond that? So it's a it's a bit of just like what if, I think it's hard to be, we can't make ourselves see this. We can't make ourselves be open to it. Although if someone's listening, you're open enough. Just look in the direction of this, and just kind of like, what if that is true? And you'll see things.
Yeah, I appreciate that. And I think it's also what we're saying is we're making something visible that perhaps we've never considered, we've never looked at, it's been invisible. So, but once it becomes visible, that's the start, right? That's
Yeah.
really all we're aiming for here. I think, again, coming back to what you said earlier, the change is coming from that internal space and what we see and what we know. And so if we see thought, we'll react to it differently.
Yeah, you don't have to put anything new in its place. You just want to see through or see what's happening in a little bit different way. And again, even just a tiny bit of suspicion about your experience, not in a bad way, but in a curious way. Curious suspicion about, is it, how much am I really this person? And do I really have this habit? Exactly. That'll take care of so much.
Well, as always, Amy, I so love being in conversation with you. And I just want to give you a chance as we come towards the end of our time. Is there anything else that you'd love to share or say?
I think just if you're, especially if you're kind of new to this conversation and you're looking in the direction of how this can help your work or your business or leadership, um, it's just really exciting, just be be really open to not knowing anything, kind of like we're saying now, like not knowing how this will impact you, not knowing what you might see, but in that place of like, wow, what if beyond all my limits are made of thought and beyond that anything is available and possible. And if that lights you up, which I'm sure it does if you're here, that's plenty.
Yeah, that one idea that you said at the end there, what if all our limits are thought, is something that can open up a whole new world for people. So Amy, thank you so much. I'm really grateful. I know our listeners are as well. And we'll be able to point people to your book and to other resources underneath the video here. But thank you so much.
Thanks so much for having